The massive alien ship appeared suddenly in Mars orbit on a quiet Tuesday morning. It was 3 times larger than the biggest human vessel ever built. On Earth, people stopped what they were doing to watch news feeds. Some prayed. Some panicked. Most just stared in silent wonder. Commander Ryan Powell sat straight in his chair on the bridge of the EDF Sentinel. His fingers tapped nervously on the armrest as he studied the alien vessel. The ship was smooth and dark, with odd angles that seemed to shift when viewed too long. "Any response to our hails?" he asked. Lieutenant Kate Wilson shook her head. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and worry lines creased her forehead. "Nothing yet, sir. Keep trying. All channels, all frequencies." The bridge crew worked in tense silence for 3 more hours before the aliens finally answered. The main screen flickered, and a figure appeared. It wasn't human, not even close. Its skin was dark purple with a hard shell-like quality. 6 yellow eyes arranged in a circle blinked independently. What might have been a mouth opened and closed several times before words came through the translator. "Greetings, Earth dwellers. I am High Chancellor Zex Toril of the Vraxian Empire, senior member of the Galactic Hegemony." Powell stood, straightening his uniform. "I am Commander Ryan Powell of Earth's Defense Fleet. We welcome you to our solar system." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. How quaint. The apes have learned to speak and dress themselves. Powell frowned but kept his voice steady. "We prefer the term humans." "Yes, well, preferences matter little. We have been observing your kind for some time. Your technological progress is unexpected for such primitive origins." Dr. Samantha Wright entered the bridge quietly, carrying her translation equipment. Powell had called for her the moment contact was established. She was Earth's best xenolinguist, having studied theoretical alien language structures for 15 years. "Chancellor," Powell said, "may I introduce Dr. Samantha Wright, who will help ensure clear communication between us." The alien's eyes all turned to study her. Another dressed-up ape. How charming. Wright didn't flinch. She stepped forward and spoke directly to the alien. "High Chancellor, we hope to establish peaceful relations with your people. Perhaps a face-to-face meeting would be beneficial." "Indeed. We shall meet on your Earth. Prepare your leaders. We arrive in 3 days." The screen went dark before Powell could respond. Wright turned to him, her expression serious. "Sir, there was something wrong with that exchange. Besides being called apes?" Powell asked with a tight smile. "Yes, the translation was working perfectly, but there were embedded meanings in their speech patterns. When analyzed through my secondary systems," she showed him her small handheld device. "See these spikes? Those indicate threat markers. They weren't just being rude. They were establishing dominance." Powell rubbed his chin. "So what do you think they really want?" "I don't know yet, but I studied first contact scenarios for my entire career, and this doesn't match peaceful intention patterns." 3 days later, Earth's leaders gathered in the United Nations Grand Hall in New York. The room was packed with representatives from every nation. Security was tight. Everyone was nervous. The alien delegation arrived in a smaller ship that landed directly in the specially cleared Central Park. 7 different alien species emerged, led by the purple-shelled Zex Toril. They were escorted to the UN building by a mixed honor guard. As they entered the hall, Dr. Wright studied them through her special glasses, which analyzed their postures and movements. "Look at how they're positioned," she whispered to Powell. "It's a war formation, not a diplomatic one." Powell nodded slightly. "I see it too. Military spacing." When the aliens took their places at the front of the hall, Zex Toril stepped forward. His 6 eyes scanned the room slowly before he spoke. "People of Earth, today marks a significant day for your species. The Galactic Hegemony welcomes you. As a protectorate state." The room erupted in confused murmurs. "You may not understand now, but this is for your benefit. Your species has potential, despite your ape-like beginnings. We will guide you, protect you, Use your resources appropriately. In time, you may even earn limited rights within our society. It wasn't an introduction. It was an announcement of ownership. The United Nations Hall fell silent. President Laura Martins of the North American Alliance stood up slowly from her seat at the center table. High Chancellor, Earth is not seeking protectorate status. We wish to establish diplomatic relations as equals, she said firmly. Zextoral made that strange sound again, something between a click and a laugh. The other aliens shifted, their body language suggesting amusement. Equals. Your species only discovered basic space travel a century ago. The Vraxians were building wormhole generators when your kind was still living in caves. Dr. Alan Garcia stepped forward from the scientific delegation. He was Earth's leading physicist, his work on quantum mechanics having revolutionized propulsion technology. His voice was calm but strong. Chancellor, we may be younger than your civilization, but we learn quickly. Our scientific achievements are primitive at best, interrupted Zextoral. We have studied your technology. Crude nuclear fission, simplistic ion drives, laughable attempts at quantum communication. The alien turned to address the entire room. Show us your most advanced creation. Prove your worth. President Martinez nodded to Dr. Garcia, who tapped commands into his tablet. The large screen behind them lit up with schematics for Earth's newest breakthrough, the quantum fold engine. This prototype can bend space-time using minimal energy. Early tests suggest it could reduce travel time between Earth and Mars to just hours instead of months. Garcia explained. The alien delegation studied the design. One of them, a tall being with translucent skin that revealed pulsing organs, whispered something to Zextoral. Interesting, said the High Chancellor. You've stumbled upon level 3 quantum manipulation. Still primitive, but perhaps you are not entirely without potential. Dr. Garcia continued showing Earth's achievements. Self-sustaining habitats, weather control systems, medical nanobots. With each presentation, the aliens' dismissal grew more obvious. Enough, Zextoral finally said. We have seen sufficient evidence of your development level. The hegemony's decision is made. He raised what appeared to be a small crystal. This is merely a demonstration. The crystal glowed briefly. Suddenly, every electronic device in the room shut down. Through the windows, they could see New York City going dark. Communications officers rushed into the hall, reporting that power was out across the entire continent. A simple disruption field, explained Zextoral. No permanent damage. Power will return in 1 hour. Commander Powell stepped forward. Was that necessary? You've made your point. Have I? The alien's 6 eyes fixed on him. I don't believe you understand your situation yet. The hegemony has encountered many species like yours. Young, arrogant, dangerous if left unchecked. President Martinez's face was pale but determined. Are you threatening us? Not at all. I am offering you protection. The universe is far more dangerous than you know. Without our guidance, your species would eventually attract attention from truly hostile forces. Zextoral's voice softened to something almost like concern. Or worse, you would continue your current path of development and eventually destroy yourselves. Dr. Wright, who had been silent, analyzing every word through her translator, finally spoke. And the cost of this protection? Minimal. Resource sharing. Some labor. Technological oversight to ensure you don't develop in problematic directions. The world leaders exchanged troubled glances. And if we decline, asked President Martinez. The High Chancellor's response was immediate. The demonstration was just that. A demonstration. Our ships currently in orbit could extend the disruption field permanently. Your civilization would collapse within weeks. Commander Powell clenched his fists but remained silent. Dr. Garcia's face showed the rapid calculations happening in his mind. You have 7 Earth days to prepare your people and formalize acceptance. The terms are non-negotiable. Zextoral turned to leave, then paused. Remember your place in the galaxy. You are just evolved apes who have learned to use tools. Be grateful for our interest. As the alien delegation departed, Commander Powell moved close to Dr. Wright and Dr. Garcia. "Tell me I'm not the only one thinking what I'm thinking," he whispered. Wright nodded slightly. "We need to talk. Privately." Garcia looked at the departing aliens, his eyes narrowing. "They're advanced, but that display had limitations. There are always weaknesses." "Tonight," said Powell. "My office. 2100 hours. We need to figure out what those weaknesses are." The underground bunker was cold and dimly lit. Commander Powell had chosen this location carefully. An old military facility 30 meters below the Rocky Mountains, built in the early 2000s before modern scanning technology existed. The walls were lined with a special material that blocked signals. If the aliens were watching, this was one of the few places they wouldn't see. "Is this really necessary?" asked Dr. Garcia, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. "Absolutely," said Dr. Wright. She had brought her own equipment, now carefully spread across the metal table. "The Vraxians have surveillance technology beyond what we understood. They're watching everything." Major Olivia Bennett arrived last, her military uniform replaced by simple civilian clothes. She was head of special operations for the Earth Defense Fleet, known for her tactical genius. Her dark eyes took in the room quickly, assessing everything. "So we're really doing this? Resistance?" she asked. Powell nodded. "We have no choice. The world governments are going to accept the hegemony's terms tomorrow. They're scared." "With good reason," said Garcia. "Did you see what they did with that crystal? Complete continental power shutdown in seconds." Bennett pulled up a chair. "I've been studying their ships. From a distance, of course. Their technology is advanced, but it's not magic." "Exactly," said Garcia, excitement creeping into his voice. "During the demonstration, I had sensors running. The energy signature was incredible, but something wasn't right." He opened his laptop and showed them the readings. "Look at this pattern." Wright studied it. "It's pulsing, like it's connected to something else." "Yes," said Garcia. "I think their technology isn't self-contained. It's drawing power from somewhere else, through some kind of quantum connection." Powell leaned forward. "Are you saying their ships aren't generating their own power?" "Not entirely. They have local power sources, but the big stuff, the technology that makes them so superior, it's coming from elsewhere, possibly their home system." The room fell silent as they considered this. "That's their weakness," said Bennett finally. "Cut off the connection, cut off their power." "But how?" asked Powell. "We don't even know where their home system is." Wright pulled out her translator device. "I might. During the delegation's visit, I recorded everything. Not just their words, but all the background noises and frequencies." She played back a series of strange sounds. "Their communications contain embedded data, star charts, coordinates. With enough time, I could decode it." Powell looked at each of them. "I'm officially naming this the Prometheus Initiative. What we're discussing is dangerous. The aliens will call it treason against the hegemony. But I believe it's our only chance." Garcia nodded. "If I can understand how their quantum connection works, maybe I can disrupt it. Or better yet, develop our own version that they can't detect." "I'll need a small team," said Bennett. "People I trust. We'll need to modify ships without the aliens knowing." "How?" asked Powell. Bennett smiled slightly. "The aliens think we're primitive. Let's use that. We'll make our modifications look like simple repairs. They won't look twice at what they consider inferior technology." Dr. Wright continued analyzing the alien communications on her device. "There's something else. The Vraxians. They're afraid of us." The others looked at her in surprise. In their private communications, they discuss how unusually fast humans have developed. "Most species take thousands of years longer to reach our level. They're worried about what we might become in another century." Powell stood up, a new determination in his eyes. "Then we need to show them they were right to worry." For the next 2 months, they worked in secret. Garcia developed new technology based on what he learned from studying the aliens. Bennett modified a small fleet of ships, disguising advanced weapons as simple structural elements. Wright decoded more alien communications, learning their language and secrets. Meanwhile, Earth officially became a protectorate of the galactic hegemony. Alien vessels now orbited the planet. Resources were being shipped off-world. Humans were told what they could and couldn't develop. The word apes became common in alien communications referring to humans. But beneath it all, the Prometheus Initiative grew stronger, a silent resistance, preparing for the moment when humanity would prove they were far more than just evolved apes. Dr. Samantha Wright adjusted her hegemony-issued translator pin and smiled politely at the two Vraxian guards. She had spent 3 months learning their language and customs. The aliens still looked down on humans, but Wright had earned a small measure of respect through her linguistic skills. "I am here for the cultural exchange program," she said in the clicking Vraxian tongue. High Commander Zolvex approved my access. The guards checked their screens and nodded. One of them led her through the massive doors of the hegemony's Earth headquarters, formerly the United Nations building in New York. Wright's heart beat faster as she followed the guard. This was the most dangerous part of their plan. If caught, she would be executed as a spy. But they needed information from the alien central database, and this cultural exchange program was their best chance. The guard left her in a large room filled with alien data terminals. "You may access basic cultural and historical files only," he said. "The system will monitor your activities." "Of course," Wright replied with a respectful bow. "I only wish to learn about the great hegemony's history." When the guard left, Wright waited 5 minutes before carefully removing a small device from her shoe. Dr. Garcia had created it to bypass the alien security systems. It looked like a simple translator tool that the hegemony had already approved for human use. She plugged it into the terminal and began working. On the screen, she appeared to be browsing cultural files. But underneath, Garcia's device was searching for specific information about the hegemony's power sources and weaknesses. Hours later, in the underground bunker, the Prometheus team gathered around Wright as she shared her findings. "The hegemony has conquered 27 species before us," she explained, showing star maps on a secure screen. "Their pattern is always the same. They find developing civilizations, call them primitive, and take over before they can become threats." Major Bennett frowned. "So we're just the latest in a long line." "Yes and no," Wright continued. "The Vraxians are especially concerned about humans. We've developed faster than any species they've encountered. Look at these comparisons." The screen showed timelines. Most species took thousands of years to advance from basic tools to space travel. Humans had done it in a few centuries. "They're afraid of us," said Powell. "That's why they're here so early in our development." "Exactly," said Wright. "And there's more. Their entire empire depends on a massive energy source in their home system. They've built enormous structures around their sun that harvest its energy. This powers their entire network through quantum entanglement." Dr. Garcia's eyes widened. "That's what I've been detecting. Their technology is all connected to their home star. Cut that connection, and their empire falls," finished Powell. Wright nodded. "But there's one more thing." She pulled up another file. "The hegemony keeps most conquered species as slaves or servants, but look at what happened to these 3. The screen showed planets that had been destroyed or rendered uninhabitable. These species fought back too hard or were deemed evolutionary threats. The hegemony eliminated them completely. The room fell silent. "We need to be careful," said Bennett finally. "If we fight openly, Earth could end up like these worlds." Garcia had been quiet, studying the data about the Vraxian sun harvesters. Now he looked up with excitement in his eyes. "I think I can build something," he said. "A propulsion system unlike anything they've seen before. Based on these readings, I believe we could travel to their home system undetected." "How?" asked Powell. "By moving through what I call dark fold space. The hegemony sensors all operate on quantum principles tied to their sun. But there are gaps in quantum fields, places they can't see because they don't know to look. Bennett leaned forward. You're talking about a stealth ship. Better than stealth, said Garcia. Invisible by their fundamental understanding of physics. They won't see us because they can't see us. How long to build it? Asked Powell. With the right team, working in secret, 6 months. Maybe less. Powell stood up. Then we have our mission. Wright continues gathering intelligence. Garcia builds this dark fold drive. Bennett prepares a crew and a ship, and I'll create a distraction when the time comes. Wright looked at the star map showing the Vraxian home system. If we do this, if we strike at their sun, we're talking about potentially affecting billions of lives. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, said Powell. For now, we focus on developing the capability. The hegemony has left us no choice but to fight back. 2 years had passed since Earth became a hegemony protectorate. Humans worked in alien mines and factories, harvesting resources for their overlords. Schools taught that the Vraxians were benevolent guardians. Anyone who spoke against them disappeared. Deep beneath the lunar surface, inside an abandoned mining tunnel, Major Olivia Bennett inspected the ship that would change everything. The vessel was small, designed for a crew of 12. Its outer hull looked rough and primitive, exactly what the aliens expected from human technology. But inside, it contained Dr. Garcia's revolutionary darkfold drive. Are we ready? She asked, running her hand along the ship's side. Garcia nodded, dark circles under his eyes from months of little sleep. The drive works. We've tested it on small jumps between Earth and Mars. The hegemony never detected us. Commander Powell entered the hangar, followed by 5 men and women in plain uniforms. This is the crew. All volunteers, all experts in their fields. Bennett shook hands with each of them. You understand the risks. This is likely a one-way trip. A tall woman with short gray hair nodded. Captain Lisa Morrison, pilot. And yes, we all understand. Better to die trying than live as pets. Powell checked his watch. The distraction starts in 6 hours. You'll launch during the chaos. Back on Earth, Wright met with Powell in their secure bunker. I have the final coordinates for the Vraxian sun harvesters. There are 7 major collection points around their star. If we can disrupt even 3 of them, their entire network should collapse. Good work, said Powell. He handed her a small device. Garcia made this. It will protect you from the initial electronic surge when we start the distraction. Wright smiled sadly. You know they'll trace everything back to us eventually. By then, hopefully Bennett and her team will have succeeded. And if not, Powell shrugged. At least we tried. 6 hours later, Powell put his plan into motion. Across the solar system, from Earth to the mining colonies on Jupiter's moons, carefully placed explosives detonated simultaneously. Not at hegemony targets that would bring immediate retaliation, but at human facilities. It looked like human rebels fighting other humans. Alien ships scrambled to contain what they thought was a human civil war. Communications channels filled with confused reports. Security forces rushed to stop the apparent human-on-human violence. In the confusion, Bennett's ship slipped away from the lunar base. No one noticed the small vessel as it moved to the edge of the solar system. There, hidden in the shadow of Pluto, Dr. Garcia activated the darkfold drive for the first time at full power. The ship shuddered. Lights flickered. For a terrible moment, Bennett thought it had failed. Then the stars outside the viewport stretched into lines and vanished. They were traveling through a space between spaces, a fold in reality that the Vraxians couldn't see or follow. It worked, whispered Garcia, looking at his instruments with wonder. We're completely off their sensors. Captain Morrison checked their course. Time to Vraxian home system. 43 days. Back on Earth, the hegemony quickly realized someone had created a coordinated distraction. Their troops rounded up suspected rebels, including many who had nothing to do with the resistance. Public executions began. Powell was in his office at Earth Defense Fleet headquarters when they came for him. 6 Draxian guards and High Chancellor Zextoral himself. "Commander Powell," said the alien, "did you really think we wouldn't notice your little rebellion?" Powell smiled calmly. "What rebellion? I've been right here, following all hegemony directives." Zextoral's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your primitive attempts at deception are amusing. We know you orchestrated the attacks. Where are your co-conspirators?" "There are no conspirators, just humans tired of being treated like animals." The Chancellor leaned closer. "You are animals. Clever apes playing with technology you don't understand. But now you will learn the price of defiance." As guards took Powell away, Dr. Wright watched from across the street, her heart heavy. She activated the small communication device hidden in her ear. "Eagle is captured," she whispered. "Operation Silent Leap is now our only hope." In the darkness between stars, Bennett's ship continued its journey toward the heart of the hegemony's power, carrying with it humanity's last chance for freedom. The Darkfold journey lasted 43 days. Inside the ship, the crew lived in tight quarters, checking and rechecking their equipment. Dr. Garcia spent most of his time fine-tuning the drive, making sure it remained undetectable. Major Bennett often found herself staring at the viewing screen, though there was nothing to see in Darkfold space. No stars, no light, just emptiness. Sometimes she wondered if they were still moving at all, or if they were frozen between moments of time. 2 minutes to exit," announced Captain Morrison from the pilot's seat. "Everyone to stations." The crew moved quickly, strapping themselves in. Exiting Darkfold space was even more dangerous than entering it. The calculations had to be perfect, or they could emerge inside a planet or star. Exiting in 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered violently. For a moment, warning lights flashed across every console. Then, suddenly, stars appeared on the view screen. And there, dominating their view, was the Vraxian sun, a massive red giant star far larger than Earth's sun. "We made it," whispered Garcia, his face pale with relief. But it was what surrounded the star that made them all stare in awe. Massive structures encircled the red giant, 7 enormous rings connected by glowing energy beams. Each ring was bigger than Earth itself, covered in technology that sparkled like diamonds against the red backdrop of the star. "The sun harvesters," said Bennett. "They're even bigger than we imagined." Lieutenant Chris Dawson, their sensors expert, checked his readings. "Those structures are pulling enormous amounts of energy from the star. And look at these readings. It's all being channeled through quantum entanglement to power their empire across the galaxy." Garcia moved to the sensor station, studying the data. "The star is unstable. See these readings? It should have gone supernova centuries ago. They're artificially stabilizing it while they harvest its energy." Bennett turned to Morrison. "Take us closer to the 3rd harvester ring. Stay in the star's radiation shadow so their sensors can't pick us up." As they approached, they could see more details. The harvester rings weren't just technology. They were home to millions of beings. Cities covered parts of the structures. Ships moved between them like busy insects. "There are people living on these things," said Morrison, her voice tight with concern. "Not just Vraxians," added Dawson, adjusting his sensors. "I'm picking up dozens of different species. Some appear to be working in exposed areas without proper protection. Slaves, most likely." Bennett's face hardened. "Remember what we came here to do. Without these harvesters, the hegemony loses power over Earth and all their other conquered worlds." Garcia continued analyzing the data. "I think I see how they're doing it. The harvesters create a delicate balance. They're drawing energy from the star, but also stabilizing it from going supernova. It's brilliant engineering." "Can we disrupt it?" asked Bennett. Garcia nodded slowly. "Yes. These junction points here, here, and here." He pointed to spots where the energy beams connected to the rings. "If we hit them with targeted energy pulses at exactly the right frequency, we could create a cascading failure." "What would happen to the star?" asked Morrison. Garcia looked grim. Best case, the harvesters fail, but the star stabilizes naturally over time. Worst case, the star goes supernova almost immediately. The ship fell silent as they considered what that meant. A supernova would destroy everything in this system. The harvesters, the Vraxian homeworld, and all the billions of beings living here. Bennett looked out at the massive structures. How many slaves are there? Dawson checked his readings again. Based on life sign readings, at least 15 billion beings on the harvesters alone. Maybe 3 billion on the planets. And how many worlds has the hegemony conquered? Bennett asked quietly. 27 that we know of, answered Garcia. Billions of people living as slaves or worse on each one. Bennett turned away from the window. We need another solution. There must be a way to free the slaves and stop the hegemony without killing billions. Garcia was already working at his station. Maybe there is. These energy junctions, I think we can disrupt them without causing a supernova. It would take more precision. But figure it out, said Bennett. We didn't come all this way to become mass murderers. For 12 hours, the crew debated their options while hiding in the radiation shadow of the Vraxian sun. Their ship's small meeting room was hot and tense as voices rose and fell. We came here to stop the hegemony, said Lieutenant Dawson, pounding his fist on the table. This is our only chance. By killing billions of innocent slaves. Captain Morrison shot back. That makes us worse than the Vraxians. Major Bennett listened to all sides, her face showing the weight of the decision before them. Dr. Garcia worked frantically at a computer terminal, running simulation after simulation. Engineer Frank Sullivan had been quiet until now. He was the oldest member of the crew, with gray hair and hands roughened by decades of work. Now he stood up slowly. What if we don't destroy the star? He asked. What if we just break their control of it? The room fell silent. What do you mean? Asked Bennett. Sullivan walked to the display showing the sun harvesters. These rings aren't just collecting energy. They're also keeping the star stable. If we target specific control nodes here and here, he pointed, we could disrupt their ability to harvest energy without destabilizing the star completely. Garcia looked up from his computer. That might work. The star would experience severe flares and disruptions, but it would eventually stabilize naturally without the harvesters controlling it. Would that cut off their power? Bennett asked. Yes, said Garcia. The quantum network would collapse. It might take hours or days, but without the steady stream of energy from these harvesters, all their advanced technology across the galaxy would fail. Morrison frowned. Even with targeted strikes, the solar flares would kill millions on those structures. Not if we warned them, said Sullivan. Most of those habitation zones have emergency shelters. If we broadcast a warning before we strike, many could reach safety. Bennett considered this. The Vraxian leaders wouldn't believe a warning from humans. No, agreed Garcia. But the slaves would. And there are billions more of them than there are Vraxians. The crew spent the next 8 hours preparing. Garcia and Sullivan refined the targets to ensure maximum disruption with minimum loss of life. They identified 7 critical control nodes that managed the harvesters' stability systems. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Dawson worked on the warning message. They would broadcast it on all frequencies, translated into every language in the hegemony database. They had no way to know how many would heed the warning, but they had to try. As they made final preparations, Bennett gathered the crew one last time. What we do today will change the course of history for 28 worlds, including Earth, she said. We came here to free humanity, but we discovered something larger. The hegemony enslaves trillions of beings across the galaxy. Today we have a chance to free them all. But at what cost? Asked Morrison quietly. That's why we're warning them, said Bennett. We're giving them a chance the Vraxians never gave us. The ship moved into position, keeping to the blind spots in the hegemony sensor network. Once in place, Dawson activated the broadcast system. Attention all beings in the Vraxian system, the message began, translated into dozens of languages. In 6 hours, there will be a massive solar event. The sun harvesters will experience catastrophic failures. Seek shelter in radiation-protected areas immediately. This is not a drill. The hegemony can no longer protect you. On the harvester rings, confusion spread quickly. The Vraxian authorities tried to block the message, calling it human sabotage. But the slaves, billions who had lived under hegemony control for generations, began moving toward the shelters. Some Vraxian citizens, seeing the panic, followed as well. "Message is broadcasting," reported Dawson. "Now we wait." Bennett nodded, watching the clock count down. 6 hours. Then we find out if we're liberators or murderers. Garcia looked at the sun through the view screen. Either way, the hegemony's power ends today. Sullivan placed a hand on Bennett's shoulder. "We're doing the right thing, Major. The only thing we can do." Bennett took a deep breath. "Prepare the targeting systems. In 6 hours, we unmake their sun." 6 hours passed. On the harvester rings, billions of beings crowded into radiation shelters. Vraxian military ships searched for the source of the warning message, but the human vessel remained hidden in the star's shadow. "It's time," said Major Bennett. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "Captain Morrison, move us into firing position." The ship glided silently toward the first target, a control node connecting 2 of the massive harvester rings. From this close, they could see the true scale of the structures. Each ring was thousands of miles across, a feat of engineering that would have been impossible for humans. "Targeting systems locked," reported Lieutenant Dawson. "All 7 control nodes are marked." Bennett took a deep breath. "Fire." 7 precision energy pulses shot from the ship, each striking its target with perfect accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the control nodes began to glow bright red. "Energy build up in the harvesters," said Garcia, monitoring his instruments. "The safety systems are failing exactly as predicted." Suddenly, massive solar flares erupted from the star's surface, lashing against the harvester rings. The structures shuddered as emergency systems struggled to compensate. Sections of the rings went dark as power failed. "It's working," said Sullivan. "The quantum network is collapsing." Across the galaxy, on 27 conquered worlds including Earth, the effects were immediate. Hegemony ships lost power. Advanced weapons stopped working. Communication systems went silent. In his prison cell on Earth, Commander Powell felt the building shake as the alien security systems failed. The force field holding him disappeared. Outside, he could hear confused shouting as Vraxian guards tried to understand what was happening. Back in the Vraxian system, the human ship was retreating to a safe distance as the star continued to flare violently. The harvester rings were breaking apart in some sections, but the emergency shelters were holding. The star itself pulsed and writhed as if in pain. "Will it stabilize?" asked Bennett, watching the chaos unfold. Garcia nodded. "Eventually, maybe in a few months, but the harvesters are finished. They can never rebuild them in time." A proximity alarm suddenly blared. A Vraxian battleship had spotted them and was closing fast. "They found us," said Morrison, taking evasive action. "Dark Fold Drive isn't ready for another jump yet." The Vraxian ship fired, its weapons still functioning at short range. The human vessel shook as a blast grazed their hull. "Return fire," ordered Bennett. Their ship's weapons struck the Vraxian vessel, damaging its engines, but the alien ship kept coming, limping toward them on auxiliary power. "They're going to ram us," said Morrison, trying desperately to maneuver away. The view screen activated. The face of High Chancellor Zex Toril appeared, his purple shell now cracked and damaged. "You primitive apes," he hissed. "Do you know what you've done? Centuries of Vraxian achievement destroyed in minutes." Bennett stood tall. "We know exactly what we've done. We've freed 28 worlds from slavery. You've doomed us all. Without the harvesters, our civilization will collapse." Then build a better one, said Bennett. One that doesn't need slaves or conquest to survive. The Vraxian ship was now dangerously close. Engine alarms blared across the human vessel. Dark fold drive online, reported Sullivan suddenly. We can jump. Zextoral's face contorted with rage. You cannot escape. The hegemony will rebuild. We will find Earth again. Maybe, said Bennett. But next time, you'll deal with us as equals, not as eights. She cut the transmission. Get us home, Captain. The dark fold drive engaged, and the stars disappeared as they slipped between spaces once more. Behind them, the Vraxian sun continued its violent convulsions, the broken harvester rings falling into its surface. 3 months later, representatives from 28 formerly conquered worlds gathered on Earth. Commander Powell, now leading the interim Earth government, addressed the diverse assembly of species. Today we begin a new chapter, he said, not as conquerors or conquered, but as equals united by our shared experience and hope for the future. Dr. Wright, serving as translator, conveyed his words to all present. In the front row sat Major Bennett and her crew, honored as the heroes who had freed the galaxy. Where the hegemony had built an empire on subjugation, the new alliance would be based on cooperation and respect. And no species would ever again be dismissed as merely evolved apes.